Imagine finding yourself in the vibrant city of Paris, 1981. The air is filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, and the streets are alive with the chatter of locals and tourists alike. Amidst this picturesque setting, a horrifying event unfolds that will shock the world. Issei Sagawa, a Japanese student studying at the prestigious Sorbonne University, commits an act so gruesome that it defies comprehension. He murders and cannibalizes his classmate, Renee Hartevelt, a young Dutch woman with a promising future. The brutality of this crime sends shockwaves across the globe, leaving people questioning the very nature of humanity. But the horror doesn't end there. Despite the undeniable evidence and his own confession, Sagawa is declared legally insane by French authorities and is deported to Japan. Astonishingly, upon his return, he is found sane by Japanese psychologists and, due to legal technicalities, is released back into society. How could someone who committed such a heinous act walk free? This is the disturbing true story of Issei Sagawa, the man who got away with murder. Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949, in Kobe, Japan. He was a premature baby, so small that his father could cradle him in the palm of his hand. From the start, he faced serious health issues, including a severe intestinal disease that required intensive medical treatment. These early struggles left him physically frail and deeply introverted. Growing up in a wealthy and influential family, Sagawa's father, Akira Sagawa, was a successful businessman, and his grandfather had been an editor for a major newspaper. Despite his privileged upbringing, Sagawa felt overshadowed by his family's prominence and his own physical limitations. Seeking solace in academics, he developed a passion for literature. He attended 𝐲𝐭𝐡 University in Tokyo, where he earned a degree in English literature. His academic pursuits provided an escape from his feelings of inadequacy and isolation. However, beneath this scholarly exterior lay dark and disturbing desires. Sagawa later confessed that his cannibalistic urges began in childhood. He recalled an incident in the first grade when he became fixated on a male classmate's thigh, igniting fantasies that would haunt him for years. As he matured, these urges intensified, leading him to commit acts of bestiality with his dog and harbor thoughts of consuming human flesh. At the age of 24, while studying in Tokyo, Sagawa's perverse desires nearly manifested into action. He followed a tall German woman to her apartment, intending to cannibalize her. He planned to slice off part of her buttocks and flee with a portion of her flesh. However, the woman awoke during his attempt, and Sagawa fled the scene. He was later arrested by police but was charged only with attempted rape, as he did not disclose his true intentions. His father intervened, paying a settlement to the victim, and the charges were dropped. These early experiences paint a portrait of a man grappling with profound psychological disturbances. Sagawa's life was a disturbing blend of privilege, intellect, and a descent into dark fantasies that would eventually culminate in a crime that shocked the world. In 1977, at the age of 28, Issei Sagawa left Japan and moved to Paris, France, to pursue a PhD in literature at the renowned Sorbonne University. Immersed in the rich culture and academic environment, Sagawa appeared to be a dedicated student. However, beneath this facade, his dark desires persisted. During his studies, Sagawa became acquainted with 𝐒𝐿, a 25-year-old Dutch student. She was intelligent, multilingual, and had a bright future ahead. Sagawa was captivated by her. He later confessed that his cannibalistic urges had been with him since childhood, and upon meeting 𝐒, these urges fixated on her. Issei Sagawa invited 𝐒 to his apartment multiple times, under the pretense of studying poetry and discussing literature. Unbeknownst to her, he was harboring dark intentions. He meticulously planned to kill and consume her, believing that by doing so, he could absorb her energy and beauty, an obsession that had plagued him for years. These meetings, which seemed innocent to 𝐒, were, in reality, steps in Sagawa's calculated plan. He prepared himself mentally and physically for the act he was determined to commit, all while maintaining the guise of a harmless, scholarly peer. This period marked the escalation of Sagawa's dark fantasies into a tangible and horrifying reality. The trust he built with 𝐒 would soon lead to an unthinkable betrayal, culminating in a crime that would shock the world. On June 11, 1981, Issei Sagawa invited his classmate, 𝐒 to his apartment in Paris under the pretense of working on a poetry assignment. As she sat at his desk, reading poetry with her back to him, Sagawa retrieved a rifle he had hidden and shot her in the neck. The sudden act of violence ended her life instantly. After the initial shock of his actions, Sagawa proceeded to fulfill his long-harbored cannibalistic desires. He engaged in acts of necrophilia with 𝐒's lifeless body. Finding that his teeth were not sharp enough to bite into her skin, he left the apartment to purchase a butcher knife. Upon returning, he will use the knife to dismember her body, consuming various parts over the next 2 days. He described the flesh as soft and odorless, comparing it to tuna. Sagawa documented each stage of the dismemberment with photographs and stored select body parts in his refrigerator for future consumption. As the remains began to decompose, Sagawa attempted to dispose of them. He placed the dismembered body parts into 2 suitcases and called a taxi to take him to the Bois de Boulogne Park. His plan was to discreetly leave the suitcases in the park's lake. However, the weight of the suitcases aroused the taxi driver's suspicion, and upon arrival at the park, Sagawa's conspicuous behavior caught the attention of passers-by. They observed him attempting to dispose of the suitcases and notified the police. When authorities arrived and opened the suitcases, they discovered the gruesome contents and arrested Sagawa on the spot. This horrific sequence of events not only ended the life of a promising young woman, but also unveiled the depths of Sagawa's depravity, leaving an indelible mark on all who learned of the crime. Upon his arrest, Issei Sagawa immediately confessed to the police, stating that he had intended to eat 𝐒's flesh. This shocking admission left authorities and the public grappling with the horrifying nature of his crime. Following his confession, Sagawa underwent psychiatric evaluations. The examining doctors declared him legally insane and unfit to stand trial. Consequently, Judge Jean-Louis Bruguière ordered that Sagawa be held indefinitely in a mental institution instead of facing criminal prosecution. Sagawa was then committed to a mental institution in France, where he remained for a period. During this time, he received visits from various individuals, including author Inohiko Yomota. These interactions led to the publication of Sagawa's account of the murder and its aftermath in Japan under the title In the Fog. The decision to declare Sagawa insane and the subsequent publication of his account sparked widespread controversy and debate. Many questioned the adequacy of the legal system in addressing such heinous acts and the ethical implications of providing a platform for a confessed murderer. The case highlighted the complexities involved in balancing legal definitions of insanity with societal expectations of justice. This phase of Sagawa's life underscores the profound challenges faced by legal and medical institutions when confronted with crimes that defy comprehension. The declaration of his insanity and his commitment to a mental institution rather than criminal prosecution left many feeling that justice had not been adequately served. After his arrest in Paris, Issei Sagawa's case caught the attention of the media in Japan, shocking the public with its horrifying details. The Japanese press covered the story widely, exploring Sagawa's background and the disturbing nature of his crime. In 1984, French officials, possibly wanting to remove the responsibility of keeping Sagawa in custody, decided to send him back to Japan. Once he arrived, he was placed in Matsuzawa Hospital in Tokyo for psychological assessment. Japanese doctors studied Sagawa and determined that he was not suffering from insanity, but was motivated by extreme sexual deviance. They stated that he was of sound mind, meaning he did not qualify for forced hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. To make matters worse, the French court had locked away all legal records connected to Sagawa's case, refusing to share them with Japanese authorities. This action made it impossible for Japan to charge him for the crime he had committed in France. With no legal way to hold him and no case that could be pursued, Sagawa was set free from the hospital on August 12, 1986. This entire situation, shaped by international legal complications and differing medical opinions, resulted in Sagawa walking free, a fact that left many people struggling to accept how a self-admitted murderer and cannibal was allowed to live without consequences. After his release in 1986, Issei Sagawa used his name to gain attention, involving himself in various media projects that both fascinated and disgusted the public. Sagawa wrote multiple books describing his crime and disturbing thoughts. One of them, In the Fog, gave a direct account of what he did. He also wrote about other violent cases, including a book on the 1997 Kobe child murders. For a time, he even wrote restaurant reviews for a Japanese magazine. Sagawa often appeared on talk shows, openly discussing what he had done. His willingness to share the disturbing details shocked audiences, making him a figure that people could not ignore. Sagawa acted in films, including an explicit one called Unfaithful Wife, Shameful Torture, in 1992, where he played a man watching others in disturbing situations. He was also involved in documentaries and other projects that focused on his crime and personality. While some were drawn to the story, many in Japan and other countries were disgusted by the fact that Sagawa was living freely. His presence in media raised questions about justice, morality, and why someone who had committed such an act was allowed to share his story for attention and money. Sagawa's life after his crime showed how people's curiosity about violence can give the worst individuals a stage, making it a lasting reminder of how crime, media, and human interest can sometimes cross dangerous lines. In the years following his release, Issei Sagawa faced significant challenges. By the early 2000s, his notoriety had faded, leading to financial difficulties. He struggled to find employment and relied on welfare benefits for support. In 2005, after the death of his parents, Sagawa repaid their debts and moved into public housing. In 2013, Sagawa suffered a cerebral infarction, commonly known as a stroke, which severely impaired his nervous system. This left him physically weakened and dependent on daily assistance from his younger brother or caregivers. Reflecting on his life, Sagawa expressed regret over his past obsessions. On November 24, 2022, Issei Sagawa died from complications of pneumonia at a hospital in Tokyo. He was 73 years old. His funeral was attended only by relatives, with no public ceremony held. Sagawa's later years were marked by a decline from infamy to obscurity, culminating in a death that, while natural, could not erase the dark legacy of his earlier actions. Issei Sagawa's story is not just a tale of horror, it is a disturbing failure of justice. A man who admitted to murder, a man who consumed human flesh, was allowed to walk free. He lived not behind bars, but in the public eye, writing books, giving interviews, and even starring in films. How does that happen? How does someone commit such an act and evade punishment? His case remains one of the most disturbing and baffling crimes in modern history. The brutal nature of what he did, the legal loopholes that let him escape justice, and the way he was able to use his crime to gain fame, it all leaves behind an uneasy feeling. It's a reminder that sometimes the systems designed to protect people fail in ways that defy logic. And now, the question is for you. How does it make you feel, knowing that a man who committed such crimes was able to live freely for decades? Does it make you question justice itself? Or is it simply another terrifying example of the things that happen in our world?